Hello, we have a very special guest today that we've been excited about for several weeks now since her episode aired. And this is going to be a more serious episode. It could get very graphic. So if you have kids and you don't want them listening to something like that, you may want to listen to this without them. And these are just our opinions, as always. We always just kind of want to give that disclaimer. We are going to be discussing The Curious Case of the Funeral Home of Horrors, and you can find this on Max. It is season 1 and it is episode 4. And it's covering Return to Nature Funeral Home, which was specifically in Penrose, Colorado. They also had a location in Colorado Springs. John and Carrie Halford were the owners of the funeral home that we'll be discussing. And I want to introduce Christina, who's our guest. She was on the episode. I saw it. I fell in love with her immediately. And I reached out to her and said, will you do our podcast? And here she is. So can you introduce yourself and where people can find you on your socials?
Yes, we couldn't be more than happy to have you on here. We're super excited.
Thank you, guys. I'm really honored to be here and to be able to share a little bit of our story. My name is Crystina Page, and my son died September 29th of 2019 in Monument, Colorado, just north of Colorado Springs. And he subsequently went to Return to Nature as one of their clients. We have now founded a nonprofit to build an infrastructure of support for the victims of Colorado's death care industry. And that's called Colorado Remembers. So you can find us online at coloradoremembers.org or on Facebook under the same name. And we're also working on doing our own YouTube and podcast right now as well. So that'll be coming in the next couple of weeks.
I'm so excited that you're going to do a podcast. I think that's a really good idea.
Thank you. Me too.
I do too.
We really want to
keep the word going.
Yeah, we really want to get everybody's stories out. As you guys know, the loudest person in any group, it kind of becomes representative of that group. And we don't want that in this case. We don't want any one person's story to be the focus of this case. But there's a lot of people out there who haven't felt comfortable sharing their story yet. So this is going to give those people an opportunity to be able to do that in kind of a more private setting, if that makes sense. Because by doing the podcast, we can do it without video. We can cloak people's voices and, things like that to allow some of those people to share their stories. So this is a huge step for us. We're excited.
I can't wait. I will be listening.
And by doing that, maybe some more people will feel more confident, just like you coming out.
Yeah, I hope so.
One of the things about the show that I did like was they allowed each of you to share a little bit about the victim. Mm-hmm. Your son, Angelica, was able to talk about Chanel, and Heather was able to talk about her son. So do you want to just tell us a little bit about David and just him as a kid and kind of highlight amazing things about him for everybody?
David was an amazing kiddo. He struggled for many, many years with mental health issues and with trying to, as he got a little bit older, navigate some of those systems that were sent to help him. He didn't manage that real well. So it's hard for me to see him as the young man who was killed in the manner he was, because growing up, he was just so goofy and so fun-loving. And as many children with autism, he was hyper-focused on a few different subjects. He loved fishing. He loved wolves. We actually bought 15 acres of land down in the San Luis Valley in Colorado so that we could do a wildlife refuge for him. His goal was to open up a wildlife refuge down in the valley and live there so that all the animals could play together at peace without eating each other. And he was just convinced we were going to do that. Super, super intelligent. Unfortunately, sometimes that got him in trouble. He was usually the smartest guy in the room and also had no filter. So he told everybody that, He was amazing. He grew up in Florida with us, and then in Kansas City for a while and back to Florida, and finally made it back here to Colorado with us in 2015. And unfortunately, he was killed 4 years later. So we had a very short time with him here. And at that time, he was still trying to navigate that system. The day that he died, he had just found out that his son was stillborn, and that sent him into mental health crisis. And unfortunately, he didn't know how to handle that, and neither did the officers who showed up to assist. This case has really been a second stage of re-traumatization for our family and for those who loved him and for all the other families who were going through this.
I feel like, and I think I told you this previously, that we could do a whole separate episode on the manner in which he was killed and mental health issues and all of that.
Yeah. It's really been a hard fight because, there's so much societal stigma about how he died. And then now this case, as you'll hear, has so many layers and complexities that it really is another very stigmatized situation that people don't necessarily want to look into. It's part of the reason I'm really glad that you guys have asked to do this with us. Death in itself is so taboo, but then when you add some of these layers to it, it becomes even more so somehow. And people tend to either watch the car wreck as they're going by or shy away from it completely because they don't want to hear about it.
That is completely accurate.
100%.
And we just did an episode last week where we spoke pretty deeply about death. So, we're definitely respectful, but we want to talk about these kinds of things.
They need to be talked about.
Yeah.
Nobody should ever have to go through something like this.
Right. Do you want to talk more about, so Return to Nature specifically was saying that they're eco-friendly. What did that mean? And is that why you picked that place for his services?
Actually, I didn't have the opportunity to pick Return to Nature. I'm not exactly sure how Return to Nature got involved in our case, but after David died, I asked if I could identify him, identify his body. I was told that his skull had been removed so that they could do toxicology on his brain. And that because of that, his face wouldn't look normal, and that it would be super traumatizing for me. And I said, no, what's going to be super traumatizing to me is not being able to say goodbye. They told me that it would be at my cost for them to fix his face so that he would be viewable, and that it would be about $8,000. And I told them that I didn't have the money, and that if they gave me a couple days, let me try to figure it out. Can you guys do payment plans? And they said they would get back to me. A couple days later, they said, let's see what we can do. We might be able to let you identify him. When I called back, I was told that he had already been cremated. So the paperwork that I signed, I actually signed after David was in their custody, but they asked me to backdate it. So that should have been my first red flag. But for most of our families, I think the eco-friendly aspect was definitely a selling point. They promised to grow trees, plant trees in our loved ones' names. So for me, that was not a selling point because I had already been sold, but it was definitely a comfort to me that I would be able to go up into the mountains. And I had this image in my head of having a little GPS tag nailed to the tree that would tell me which one was for my son. And I would go up there and have a picnic with the puppies and honor my child. They were also one of the most affordable places in the area. So that was a big selling point for a lot of us also. But they definitely pushed the green revolution for sure.
Did any of the trees actually happen for anyone that you know of?
Not that we know of, no.
Okay.
About a year after his death, I did call back to the funeral home and ask them, where did you plant his tree? I'd like to know where it is. I want to go visit. And I was told then that they plant a tree for each person, but that they don't keep track of which one's which. And now we know that, as far as we've heard, there were never any trees.
Right, which would make sense.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course, there wasn't any trees. Why didn't we
Yeah.
expect them to follow through with anything?
Right. And then do you want to talk about, as much as you want to share, what happened to him after he was sent to the funeral home and how he was found and all of that?
Yeah. So we don't get a lot of information. A lot of it has come from each of us sharing our own personal stories with each other so that we can kind of build on that and figure it out for ourselves. What I do know was that my son was dumped out of his body bag and laid naked in the corner of an inoperable fridge with dozens of other bodies laying on top of him. I was told directly by the FBI during my notification call that he was exposed when he was found, and I have his clothing that he was wearing when he died. So I put together the idea that he was naked and exposed. That's not necessarily the condition that all the bodies were found. We did see some pretty graphic photos in court. Many of the bodies were in body bags. And not openly exposed. But I do know that my son was in what we now call room L, which was a refrigerator inside of room K. There were 3 refrigerators on site, and to our knowledge, none of those were working.
Do you think they were ever working?
I
That
don't.
was going to be my question.
I don't. I've personally seen messages that John sent to a girlfriend of his in May of 19 that said that the compressor had gone out on the fridge and that he had bodies laying around like it was Jonestown. And of course, this is several months before the crime timeline starts for this case, which is officially September 15th of 19. But again, in May of 19, he was sending messages to his friends saying that the compressor was out on the fridge.
And is the count, is it holding at 191 bodies were found?
We believe so, yeah. We were at number 190, but then kind of out of nowhere in the state case, they started talking about 191, and we're not exactly sure where that extra body came from. But our understanding is that there's a total of 191, 188 of which have been identified. So there's still 3 bodies that were found that have not been given identities yet.
And outside of the refrigerator and the structure and people who were found there in the show, do you want to talk about how other people were found? Like Angelica thinks she has cement. Well, she doesn't think, she knows she has cement. And Heather has someone else because there's metal in her ashes and her son never had that type of orthopedic surgery. We have coffins that have been brought up and have the wrong bodies in them.
One of the things that we really want our community to understand is that there were not 191 victims. John and Carrie had issued death certificates for, I believe the number is 1,178 people. And only 191 of those have been found. So that leaves almost 1,000 people that have not been located.
So we still have 1,000 people
Yes.
that we don't know where they are, if they were taken care of properly, or that's
Correct.
insane.
We have, aside from just those 191 that were found, we have, I believe it's 987 that have not been located. Now, what that means is Good news is that that may mean that there's 1,000 people who were properly handled. However, there's other things that have gone on in the case that lead us to believe that that couldn't possibly be the case, and that at least a portion of those people were not handled properly. So when you look at some of these people like Ange and Heather and so many more who have not had their loved ones found in the building, those people are left to wonder what really did happen to their loved ones. Some of them have cement, some of them have cremated remains. The problem is, though, that we know that the funeral home records are clearly trash, but also the crematory records are not accurate. There were a handful of people that we know of whose bodies were found in the building, but who the crematory had record of properly cremating. And those two things are very exclusive of each other. So that leads us to believe that we can't trust any of the crematory records.
Right. And that's the
Right,
worst
yeah.
part. Those people are never going to know, probably.
Right. Right.
Now,
Carol and I
Sorry.
jokingly say sometimes, and this sounds awful, but we sometimes say that we're the lucky ones. As awful as it is that our loved ones were found in the building, I now know where my son is. There are so many more who go to bed every night wondering where their dead child is, wondering where their husbands are, wondering where their mothers are. And the cremated remains can't be tested for DNA because the cremation process destroys the DNA and the RNA. So there's nothing that we can do, even if they still have that urn that they were given by Return to Nature 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago. There's still no way for us to tell if that's their loved one or not. In fact, I refer to Grandma Fido sometimes. She is the one that I carried for 4 years thinking it was my son, and they've been confirmed to be cremated remains. My timeline is a lot shorter because David died so soon on, and I received the cremated remains back in an urn in October of 19. So my timeline of who this could be is much shorter. But the people later down the line whose loved ones died, let's say in July of 23, they have 4 years worth of who could this be?
And talking about the remains that you had, and on the show, you said, "Oh, I've been wearing this for 4 years." And when we spoke a month ago or so, you had said, or I had said to you, I think it's so sweet that you wear those, even though you know it's not your son. But then you said, and this was such a good point, well, what if it's a horrible person? What if this is a serial killer? And I'm wearing this around. And I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't even think about that aspect.
Yeah.
I think for me, I feel like I have a duty to honor that person, no matter who they are or how they died, because their family isn't able to. Whoever it is that I'm carrying, their family has been carrying something else, right? They thinking that what they had was their loved one. Or in some cases, they didn't get anything back. We've now talked to 2 women who are Grandma Fido possibilities. One of them, her best friend was a client of Return to Nature, and their family never received cremation remains back. Another one passed in April of 2019, and it took until June before they got cremation remains back. And that raised some red flags for them because how long does it take to do the cremation? So that's just 2 examples. I don't know if either one of those people are the one that I'm carrying, but if it is, now that especially since I know a little bit about each of those people, I feel like is kind of my duty to honor that person in the same way that their family would have. The problem is that when you throw in religion and social norms and belief, there's no way without me knowing who I'm carrying to properly honor the person in the way that their family would have, or in the way that they would have wanted to be honored. So now we have almost 1,000 people who are in that same position of walking around not knowing if who they're carrying is their loved one or another loved one from another family. And if they are, how do we honor that person? How do we lay them to rest? Where do we spread them? Where do we take them? What do we do with it? We've had many of our Zoom calls talking about that. What do we do with the cremated remains if we don't know who that person is? Or even if we do know that that person isn't our loved one, what do we do with it now? That's kind of the big push behind Colorado Remembers. We have the two sides of it, one building that emotional and psychological, if you will, support network, so that we can all get through this together. The other part of our mission is to build a memorial park so that we have somewhere that all of us can go to spread who it is that we have, hoping that if all of us do that, then we can each go visit our loved ones.
There's so many
Great
special
idea.
things that have come out of this, I think, for all of you. One is that you all have been able to bond, and you have these Zoom calls every week, once or twice, just to talk this through. And I also think it's so special the way that you do carry those ashes. And maybe that doesn't seem like a big thing to you, but you've got a lot to deal with, and the fact that you still consider this person, I think, is amazing, and just speaks to you as a person.
Yeah,
Absolutely. It just, yeah,
it
it shows your character.
Thank you. To be honest with you, that aspect has almost become as heavy, if you will, as what actually happened to my child. Because now, in this case, John and Carrie stole the very last actions any of us took for our loved ones, and something so sacred. And it's almost like they ripped that from us and then just scattered it amongst us and made it each of our responsibilities. I think because I know where my son is, it gives me a little bit of ability to heal through that. But not knowing who I'm carrying is something that I'll never be able to resolve. And that's so small compared to the people who are still missing their loved ones and don't know if who they're carrying is theirs.
And I love, we
Makes
can talk
sense.
about this later. The park idea is brilliant, and we talked about it a month ago in your plan for that, and we definitely want to cover that at the end so that people can help you achieve that goal.
Be
But
great.
that whoever came up with that it's such a good idea, and like so respectful to everybody involved, whether it's the people that are still here dealing with this or whether it's the people who were mistreated at the funeral home.
Yeah.
So we'll give out all that information at the end.
It's an amazing idea. And I was wondering, are the police, you may not be able to answer this, but are they still actively investigating the other individuals that we're not sure where they are?
No, our understanding is that there really hasn't been investigation into that. We say no body, no crime. That's really how it feels in this case. In fact, we have families who did burials, who asked at one point if they could help do exhumations so that they could verify who was in the gravesite, because we do know that they misburied some people. We don't know what the total number is, but in court, we viewed photographs of a woman who had been buried in somebody else's intended grave. And when some of our friends asked for the exhumations, we were told that without a body, they will not do the exhumation. So, for example, there was a gentleman found who was an honorably discharged veteran. To my understanding, when they called to notify the family, the wife said, no, 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 he can't possibly be there in the building. We did an honorable burial for him out at the National Cemetery, 21 gun salute, all of his friends. This just can't be. And when they dug up his intended gravesite, they found the body of a woman who had been wrapped in duct tape. If there was a situation like that where a body is found that's supposed to be in Joe's grave, they would go dig up Joe's gravesite to see who actually is there. But if Mary died and Mary was buried and Mary's body isn't found, then the investigative agencies are just assuming that Mary is in her gravesite.
I have a question. So the majority of the ones, say, like your son who's found in a refrigerator, seems like maybe a monetary thing. They were trying to not cremate to just pocket the money and not do anything. But what do you think would be the reasoning for burying the wrong people? Because that doesn't make them any money. Like, are they just sick?
You're still spending money.
I don't think this was a monetary motive at all, to be honest with you. I saw photographs in court that led me to believe that this wasn't monetary. The trade value of a cremation is between $200 and $300. So what that means is they may charge me $600, return to nature, but then return to nature is only charged $200 or $300 by Wilbert or Roselawn or the other crematory. So it's only a couple $100 out of their pocket. If you add all of that up, it was only $52,000 or $56,000 that it would have cost for them to do all of the cremations. And that includes the ones that were supposed to have been buried. Okay. So maximum value, if you assume that each one was 300, not any that were two, it's only 52 or 56,000.
That's
The
nothing.
mitigation efforts that they had to go through, I believe, would have been far greater than 50,000. They had tarps, bug bombs, air fresheners, fans, buckets, all sorts of things to try to mitigate the damage. All of those things cost them money. So I do not believe that this was a financially motivated crime at all, which is horrifying because we don't know what the motive was. You know, in similar cases here in Colorado, there were cases where they sold them off for medical science. There have been cases where there were religious, cultish type aspects to the case. We don't see any of that in our case. One of the first things that I asked the investigators was there abuse? We know that this is an abuse of corpse charge, but was there any outright abuse aside from the neglect of the bodies just being there, right? Which is horrible enough. But I wanted to know, like, were each one of their left ears cut off? Were some of the bodies dissected for science or medical purposes? Was there a cross on each forehead? Was there something that John and Carrie were doing that made sense in any of it? Not made it better, but made sense, right? If you saw on the news, the 191 bodies were found and that every one of them was missing their left ear, or every one of them had a cross cut in their cheek, or every one of them had scalpel marks or something like that, you could make sense of it. You can wrap your brain around it. You wouldn't think it was any better, but you could at least understand why they did what they did. But in this case, from what we understand, there were no signs of anything like that happening. They were just there. And to me, that's almost worse in the sense that we don't know why. We don't know what their intentions were. And it doesn't seem like there's any sense to it. It doesn't seem like there's any rhyme or reason behind it.
And it's weirder too, because from what the show said, he grew up in a family of people who worked in funeral homes.
Mhm.
So it just is an extra what's happening here? Is that how his parents were treated? Like, is this something that, maybe this goes back, and I doubt it, but who knows at this point? Could you tell us what Colorado, what they consider abuse of a corpse, since you just said that?
Sure. My understanding of the charge itself is that it's anything that would outrage family sensibilities. So what that means is, let's say all else told, I wanted to be burnt on a pyre, right? I want everybody to put me in the backyard swimming pool and shoot flaming arrows at me and go up in smoke. That wouldn't be, there may be other laws that are violated, but that would not be abuse of a corpse, because this is what I want. This is what the family agreed to. And in this fake story, this is all legal. Everything's good, right? However, if the funeral home knew that I wanted to be cremated and they put me in their backyard pool and shot flaming arrows at me, that would be abuse of a corpse, because now my family is pissed. And that's kind of a rough explanation of it. But abuse of a corpse doesn't necessarily speak to how the bodies were handled, as much as it speaks to the fact that it wasn't handled in the way that the family and the dead intended.
Okay, thanks. I think we we needed to just put that out there so
So
people know.
I kind of
part of,
like how they look at it different there. Like, it's not just the normal things when you think about abuse, it's just simply anything that that person would not want done to their body.
yeah.
I like that.
Now, in Colorado, my understanding also is the abuse of a corpse was intended to be a secondary crime. And this is part of the problems that we've had with legislation here and with the enforcement of penalties for abuse of a corpse. For example, it was intended to be, let's say there's a murder, and then the murderer drags the body down the street and causes further damage to the body after the murder. Abuse of a corpse would come in as a secondary crime. Clearly, the murder itself is the high crime. That should be the felony. The abuse of a corpse would come in as an exacerbating symptom, if you will. It's an added charge. The problem with that is that these fools in Colorado continue to make abuse of a corpse their primary crimes, such as in Sunset Mesa, Apollo, Return to Nature, Kent, a few of these other crimes. And our system isn't set up to treat abuse of a corpse as the primary crime. So in Colorado, it's not even a Victim Right Act eligible crime. So, for example, if your house is burgled and somebody comes in, kicks in your door, and holds you at gunpoint and attempts to rape your wife, as a victim of that crime, your door is replaced. You might get self-defense courses. You would certainly get therapy, everything that you need to try to make you whole again. Abuse of a corpse doesn't qualify for two reasons. One, nobody thought to put it on the list of qualifying crimes. And two, our justice system looks at the dead as the victim. So what that means for our families is that we don't get help.
I hate that. After my niece was murdered, we used those services. I hate that you don't get them.
So the families of the 191 were given a $2,500 check, and that was to cover mental health services and transportation back and forth to sentencing to come share our victim impact statements.
That's
So
like 10 therapy sessions. That's hardly
Yeah, I'm like,
anything.
that doesn't go very far.
it doesn't,
Therapy's
especially
expensive.
when you're trying to find a particular type of therapist. I have a psychological background as well. I'm a crisis responder. I deal with some crazy traumas, right? I have kind of made it my habit to help people who can't find help anywhere else. Dragging people out of ditches and figuratively and literally, and trying to get people the resources that society isn't set up for. And this whole case has been very much that. We were told by the FBI and by the victim specialist that we just needed some grief counseling. This is not grief. I am not grieving. Grieving is what we all did 2, 3, 4, 5, almost 6 years ago now, when our loved ones were lost. Each of us went through that death process in a very different way, depending on whether it was 100-year-old Aunt Zoa who didn't wake up one morning, or it was a child who was killed, or a husband lost to cancer, or a daughter in a car accident, right? All of us went through our grieving processes, and each of those looked very, very different for us at that time. Now, we are being asked to relive not just their death, but knowing that something worse than death happened after their death. It's not grief, it's trauma. And it's not PTSD, because we're not post anything, because many of us don't know what happened. We don't know how it happened. We don't know why it happened. 1,000 people don't know if it happened to them or not, or if they're just being traumatized by somebody else's story, or if they're ignoring and hoping and their loved one was victimized. So there's all these layers and complexities there that don't give us an avenue of healing. And to have the very system that is supposed to be helping us through this have such a misunderstanding of what we're going through has been re-traumatizing for us. In fact, over and over on our Zoom calls or on my crisis calls, I hear victims saying, I have been victimized by the system more than I've been victimized by John and Carrie. That's one of the things that we're trying to fix, is being able to get some of this legislation to address what this really is. This isn't a secondary crime, and it's not worthy of secondary status. What happened in John and Carrie's possession is a very separate and distinct crime from his homicide. The two are not related. The only reason they're related is because of the chronology and because one had to happen for the other to take control. But these are very separate incidents, and the system is trying to treat us as if the Halford case is just an extension of the death itself. And nothing could be farther from the truth, except that many of us are going through more trauma and more stigma in trying to ask our same communities to come around and support us. And that support just isn't there.
Can I ask you?
And this is when you need it the most.
It is. It is. But we can't even tell you what we need. I can't tell you now. I could articulate it a little bit better, but a year and a half ago when this case broke, I remember it was a week before Halloween, and I spent weeks calling every social services organization I could possibly find, trying to get help for our families, trying to get help for myself for gas money to get here, or help with a memorial fund, or mental health services, or calling churches in Colorado Springs and asking, hey, I'm coming all the way from Ohio to come back and cremate my son. Can I park in your parking lot? I just need a safe place to park where I won't get towed overnight. We couldn't find any help at all. In fact, we had so many people hang up on us thinking that it was prank calls because it was around Halloween. 988 was hanging up on us. So who do you go to? If you can't go to the resources that the community has set up for worst case scenarios, where then do you go? And I think that's why we kind of leaned in on each other, because each of us is going through our own private struggle and our own separate cases in a sense. Nobody has any facts, and all of the information is being kept from us and things like that. And we're trying to figure out how to heal, but how do you heal from something if you don't know what you're healing from?
And if this isn't a worst case scenario, I don't know what they would consider one to be.
Yeah. Yeah,
I
and
mean,
that's the whole thing, is our society isn't set up to help us. In fact, I called Travelers Aid. I remember hearing about them way back in the 80s and 90s. And I always knew, for some reason, this stuck in my head. I don't know why, but I always knew that if somebody died and I needed to get cross country for the memorial, there was some agency out there that would help me with some gas money or a train ticket. So I called them as one of my hundreds of places that I called. And I remember the woman asking me, I was very careful about the words I used. And I said, I just need to get out there for cremation and memorial. And she asked when he died. This was the end of October. And I said, September 29th. And she said, of 2023, of course, and laughed. And I said, no, of 2019. And she said, why wasn't he cremated then? And I said, well, you'd really have to ask the funeral home. He was supposed to be cremated, but his body was just found by the investigators in the funeral home. And she said, well, that's between you and the funeral home, ma'am. We don't get involved in those things. And I said, ma'am, with all due respect, I didn't change my mind. This is a crime, and it's getting ready to be national news. And I am simply asking for help to get from Ohio cross country so that I can cremate my son again. And she said, oh my God, you need Jesus. And I said, fantastic. Will you please put him on the phone? Because nobody else will listen to me. And she hung up on me. And there were so many of those calls back to back to back that I was driving down Interstate 70 coming here and just calling from the time I got up on the road until people were out of the office for the day. And we couldn't find a single person that would help. In fact, the FBI in Ohio, I had to meet with them before I came out here. They threatened me with arrest because I wouldn't give them the urn. So our conversation didn't go real well, but they ended up giving me, I think, a $10 Subway gift certificate and a $10 CVS gift certificate and a $20 Visa card or something
So
like that.
helpful.
Months and months later, after I'd come here and was already advocating and already kind of a thorn in their side, and they realized I was settling in here to stay, I remember Alicia, our victim specialist with the FBI, telling me, like, there's no help. What else do you want? Just get a really good grief counselor. And I was like, Alicia, you're not understanding. We're having people like attempting suicide. We're having people have complete breakdowns. We need more help than you pointing us to the yellow pages for a grief counselor. And she goes, well, Christina, we have already helped you. And I said, you have? What do you mean you've helped me? And she said, well, we gave you some gift cards. And I said, you gave me like $40 worth of gift cards. Like, thank you. I don't want to come across as ungrateful, but $10 towards a Subway meal isn't helping me not have nightmares of this case. And this is their second go round. Most of the investigation and prosecution team worked the Sunset Mesa case also. And if you talk to those victims, they'll tell you the same, that they didn't even get that $2,500. Nobody stepped up in any way for them. Nobody gave them counseling. Nobody wrapped their arms around them and said, it'll be okay. We don't know how, but we're going to walk through this with you. Instead, they continued to lie to them and hide information and do the same thing that they have to us. So in many ways, the system and the community have re-victimized us in ways that we didn't even know were possible, on top of a crime that's so atrocious that nobody knows how to help us or how to tell us to get help. It's been a nightmare from start to finish.
It's almost like they treated you like you put yourself in your own situation.
You know, it's felt like that in a lot of ways. You know, I understand that there's the integrity of the case has to be paramount, right?
Mhm.
Me wanting answers about my son or about your great grandmother or about the general conditions of the building has to come second to the case and the prosecution. And also the unintentional traumatization of people who would see that information unwillingly, right? But there's so much information that we don't know. There's so much that they have flat out lied to us about and told us that we were crazy for thinking this. And then later we found out evidence that it really did happen that way. Things like that. That dynamic in this case, specifically with the victim specialist, has been so harmful that many of the crisis calls that I take aren't about what the person is dealing with knowing the conditions. It's what the person is dealing with not knowing and not understanding and feeling like they've been lied to and not cared for by their community.
Do you feel, and this is very specific just to you, do you almost feel like this second set of dealing with this was worse than the actual death of your son?
I
It's
don't know.
it's very
Um,
different,
it
obviously.
is. And I think about that a lot. We try very hard as co-victims, if you will, not to compare each other's grief because my level 10 trauma could be your level 1 trauma, right? So we try to be very careful about that. But I play with that a lot in my own head about the emotional and mental health impact of my son's death and then his after death, if you will. And I don't know which is worse. I think in the homicide, I felt very alone for about 6 months. In March of 2020, about 6 months after he died, a woman named Donna reached out to me, Donna Chisesi, and her son, Jonathan Victor, had been killed by police. And she reached out to me and she said, I just want you to know that you're not alone. And I was like, what do you mean I'm not alone? This doesn't happen except for like the 2 or 3 times a year we might see on the news. And she was like, oh, honey, you're about to go through the worst thing you've ever imagined. And you're not going to have support. And everybody is going to think that you're just a horrible person because of the way your son died. So, like, strap in for the ride, girl. At first, I kind of like waved her off, like maybe that's her experience. But I found over the next 4 years, and I say four because then the FBI called and that twisted it on its head. But that next 4 years was very much a fight, even in my own community, trying to get anybody to talk to me about what had happened was a fight. I've wanted to, of course, talk to the SWAT members who took my son's life. That wasn't able to happen until very recently, and only as a result of this case. No politicians, except for Spike Cohen, have ever reached out to me to see how this impacted the community or my life. None of the city representatives, the mayor, the governor, nobody reached out and said, I'm so sorry that your son died this way. What is your take on it? In fact, I don't hold the SWAT team members responsible for my son's death because they were acting on information that they had when they arrived. And I can only judge them based on what they knew at the time. However, the man who set him up, and I will say that till the day I die, my son was absolutely set up by an officer, knowing that my son was in mental health crisis, knowing that I was a crisis responder and that I was on scene at his invitation. And instead, he reported that my son was homicidal and that he had taken a hostage, both of which he knew not to be true. But that's the information SWAT had when they arrived. The shooting was considered justified by the 4th District. who is now prosecuting the Halford case. I expected the shooting to be justified, mostly because of what had happened, because when you're fighting a big system, the big system usually wins. But I also expected there to be a little bit further investigation, and there wasn't any. My understanding is that Rob Stewart, who is the man who set my son up, was interviewed once for about 7 minutes, and I have transcript of that interview. But there was no further digging into what happened. So the next 4 years was very much my fight for justice as a whole. I knew I wasn't going to get justice for my son. It was kind of a foregone conclusion. Qualified immunity in our country is very difficult to get around. But what we did was in May, I believe, of 2020, we were able to strip qualified immunity from Colorado. So we were able to make some changes here for that. So for the next couple of years, I was nomadic and traveled the country, meeting with other victims of police homicide and violence, community violence also, and trying to build bridges in our community to figure out how can we address the mental health issues so that there's a qualified responder showing up rather than somebody who's only been trained with his gun. So when the phone rang on October 24th of 23, the caller ID that popped up said, F these guys, no therapy. And I had actually I was trying to put it as a note in my contact and instead renamed 4th District Victims Assistance as that. So it popped up and I answered the phone. What do you want? You're 4 years late. And the lady was like, what do you mean? I'm calling for Crystina. And I said, yes, unless you're calling to offer me therapy, I don't want to hear anything from you. And what had happened was that when David died, they had determined that I wasn't a victim. So I didn't qualify for therapy, similarly to this case, under that Victim Right Act. In this situation, it almost feels like, for me personally, that I've been thrown back into that same mess. And I've wondered, maybe I'm meant to try to clean this up the second time because I wasn't able to advocate properly the first time. You know, there's these same glaring defects in our system in both of these cases for my son. There's not the type of mental health support that our victims truly need. And whether you considered me a victim in my son's homicide or not, I think that all of us would agree that the woman living next door to you who just witnessed her son being killed by police should have therapy, whether she's considered a victim or not, simply for the safety and well-being of the community, if nothing else. How do I have a positive contribution to my community or to my city if my brain is so messed up from the homicide and that's not addressed? So in that sense, this feels like Groundhog Day because I'm still fighting the same system to get something that, in my opinion, should just be normal. And I know that that's not the reality of the situation, but I believe that if somebody goes through 100 resources begging for help, there should be some kind of a response from the community that says, let's find the person that's right for this situation. Let's get you the help that you need. Let's address what you're going through. Maybe not because it's required, but maybe because we see another human in our neighborhood, in our city, in our community struggling, and that person's mental health issues could cost our community more than a few therapy sessions. Maybe we throw together a voluntary peer counseling group. Maybe we set them up with Zoom calls from some lady in Michigan that knows what she's talking about. I don't know. I don't know what that response should be, but I know that there should be a response there. And for the Halford case with Return to Nature, again, we don't have 191 victims. We have 191 dead that have been identified. The victims in this case are every single person who loved my son and wakes up every day less functional than they were before they knew he wasn't cremated. That means myself, my husband, my mother, who lived with him when he died, both of my other children, my stepchildren, his stepfather, friends, other family, cousins. How do we count how many people were affected by my son's death or his subsequent processing? So let's say each dead has 5 people who were affected by this to the degree that they need some kind of a response. Let's pretend in my son's case, it's his 2 parents, his grandmother, his brother, and his sister. You now have 5 people times 191. That's almost 1,000 people who were affected. And that's only the ones who have been identified. Then you have 1,000 people missing. So let's say there's 5 people who loved each one of those. That's another 5,000 people. That means we're looking at 6,000 people in this case who are affected to such a degree that they're having nightmares, that they're waking up in the morning and may not be able to go to work, that they may not be able to sleep. When they do sleep, it's awful sleep. They may lose their jobs, lose their marriages. We have so many people affected by this case. And to have the system as a whole say, here's $2,500 for some therapy, but that's only for the 191 and it's only 1 check per dead. So that means in my case, for example, my mother gets $500 worth of therapy. My children and my husband and I each get $500 worth of therapy. And then all the money's gone and we don't get to travel back to court to be able to share our impact statements. How do you make that okay? How do you pretend that that's okay as a response? And I'm extremely grateful that we were given that help at all, but we had to fight for that help. And it turned out that the person who was in charge of cutting those checks used to own the place that the Halfords tried to buy before it fell out in a financial dealing and they bought Return to Nature. So the system re-victimized us by having a funeral director that had direct financial dealings with the Halfords being the one who was supposed to be cutting our checks. And that didn't happen for almost 4 months when we were finally able to get him fired, replaced, and another woman into gear who was able to get those things to happen. But we have literally had to fight tooth and nail every step of the way, and we still don't have the information or the help that we should have.
Well, and as strong as you clearly are, all of this fighting is to your own detriment of your
It
own
is.
mental health.
It is.